up to 2,000.
I call the Honourable Phil Goff.
Mr Chairman, what a typical approach by this government. They've got a problem with youth unemployment. We know why they've got a problem with youth unemployment, because they've got no vision for growing the New Zealand economy. John Key, who decried 25,000 teenagers being out of work in 2008, his big achievement has been to increase the rate of youth unemployment by a further 5,000 to 30,000. And if you take the people that are 20 to 24, make that another 90,000 young people out of work. And what is this government's answer? What is its vision to deal with unemployment? Its vision is to cut the starting rate for 16 and 17-year-olds and some 18 and 19-year-olds by 20%. You know what these people in the National Party are proposing, Mr Chairman? They're proposing that young people working in the same rate, the same productivity, doing exactly the same job in exactly the same way as an older person can be paid $11 an hour. $11 an hour. That's not even enough for the member over there to pay for his gin and tonic at a local bar. And he wants young people to live on $11. Why, I want to know from that member, should a teenager making hamburgers in the same way, at the same rate, with the same efficiency as a 25-year-old be paid a whole lot less? Will that create new jobs? No, Mr Chairman, it won't. The evidence is there that it will simply displace older workers who are currently doing the job. So the poor guy or woman that's older and working making those hamburgers, they're not going to have a chance, because the boss is going to sack them or not employ them in the first place in order to get cheap labour at $11 an hour. $11 an hour. And will this work, Mr Chairman? Well, let me quote the authority, the Minister of Social Development, if you can call her an authority. She opposed youth rates just 2 years ago. This is what she said. "We are not convinced it would reduce youth unemployment, plus it would be a distraction from the really important work of improving productivity and growing the economy in order to create long-term jobs which will keep young people in New Zealand." End quote. That's what Paula Bennett, the Minister for Social Welfare, was saying 2 years ago about Roger Douglas's bill. So what's the change in mind? And Jackie Blue, National, quote, has not seen any evidence to show that young people are losing their jobs because of youth rates. We are not convinced this bill will reduce youth unemployment, end quote. So how's that for hypocrisy? Against youth rates one day and for them the next. And why are they for them? Because they've run out of ideas. They have no vision for New Zealand other than it being a low-wage economy. And what is the problem with New Zealand? Why did we lose 53,000 New Zealanders to Australia last year? Because the jobs aren't in New Zealand and because we have low wages. So this is a bill to increase the flow of Kiwis across the Tasman so they can put their energy and their taxation into the Australian economy. This is a government that has no vision about creating jobs. This is a government that has no vision about upskilling New Zealanders for high-paid jobs. Why is it that the number of apprenticeships are down 20% on when this government got office? Down 20%. Why is it that they slashed $53 million in one budget out of the skill training budget? Why is it that in Christchurch on Sunday, on St Patrick's Day, the bars were full of Irish workers imported to do the work because this government had no plan to upskill New Zealanders to rebuild Christchurch? That, Mr Chairman, is an absolute disgrace. An absolute disgrace. This is not only counterproductive because it's not about increasing skills and increasing jobs, it's also unjust and unfair. You know, what they are doing, what this government is doing, is saying that young people are out of work because it's their fault we're paying them too much. Not that they're out of work because this government has failed utterly in its economic management. So what do they say? we will put our young people on $11 an hour. That's a bit rich coming from these people, the cabinet ministers and MPs that gave themselves a big fat increase in income by cutting the tax rates on the top income earners. That's unfair, Mr Chairman. Mr Chairman, it's not, Mr Chairman.
I call the Honourable Phil Goff.
Mr Chairman, it's not on that this is a government that will reward the most wealthy people in the country, but will continue to hit the people that are at the bottom of the heap. Why is it that Leslie Longstone is getting $1,000 a day in severance for each day she worked? $425,000. That's what they'll hand out to the people at the top. $425,000 of New Zealand taxpayer money given to Leslie Longstone because Hekia Parata couldn't get on with her. So they'll reward the rich. Why is it that Don Elder, the Chief Executive of Solid Energy, retains his salary right now at a rate of $1.3 million a year while he's at home doing the garden? They'll reward the rich, but their answer is always to cut the income of people at the bottom. So the brave new world for the National Party is to have our young people leave school and go out and work at $11 an hour. That will not solve the unemployment problem amongst young people. They know that. The last speaker on the national side said it creates 2,000 jobs for 16 and 17-year-olds. What he forgot to tell the House was that it takes away 2,000 jobs from the people that are 20, 25, 35, 45. This is about job displacement. This government has no ideas about job creation. They brought in the Youth Guarantee Scheme. That was going to get lots of people into jobs. I saw a withered pumpkin that was produced under one scheme. This government wasted millions of dollars on a scheme they then scrapped. They talk loudly about the Limited Service Volunteer Scheme. Now, that has its good aspects, but the truth of the matter is that 40% of the young people going onto that scheme go back onto the benefit and go back into unemployment. What this country needs is a genuine answer for upskilling our young people so that we can be an innovative, high-growth, high-skill, high-tech economy. It doesn't need a government that says the answer is to force wages down to $11 an hour, and that's what they're doing. This government has no ideas. We had a job summit, and remember the jobs that were going to be created out of that? That was 4 years ago. Where are the jobs? Let the next National Party speaker rise up on his or her hind legs and tell us how many jobs were actually created. You know, Mr O'Connor, what the answer is? Less than 1 in 5 of what John Key promised. A job summit that was about rhetoric, it wasn't about creating jobs. And now, in desperation, they come to the House and say, if there's youth unemployment, it must be the young person's fault, and we will hammer them. There is one thing in this bill that I will support, and that's Darian Fenton's SOP. The SOP that talks about lifting the minimum wage to $15 an hour. And why will I support that, Mr Chairman? Because it's wrong that 40% of the kids living in poverty in this country right now come from working families. 40% of the kids living in poverty come from working families. I've got an electorate full of people where mum and dad take it in turns. They do shift work. One goes out during the day, one goes out at night. They cannot produce enough income on the minimum wage they get paid, including cleaning those members' offices. They cannot get enough income to have a living wage. I grew up in New Zealand where people said if you do an honest works week, you get a living wage for that week. And I want one member of the National Party to stand up and say why people working hard doing an honest week's work aren't entitled to a living wage. One member to stand up and say that he or she could live on $13.75 an hour, which is the minimum wage. It is not a living wage. Most particularly, it isn't a living wage in the city that I represent in Auckland or in Mount Roskill. That money does not give you enough money to feed your kids properly, to clothe them, to give them the opportunities that most other kids have. Why is it in my low-income schools, some of those kids have never got to the beach? They've never been away on a holiday. That's asking too much. Mum and dad can't even afford to put shoes on their feet. And this government says, we'll pay them $13.75 an hour, but hang on, if you're a young person, we'll pay you $11 an hour. How generous. What a decent government. What a government that can reward itself with big fat tax cuts but can't give people a living wage, and now say that the answer to youth unemployment is to cut the wages of those young people doing the same work as the people next to them to $11 an hour. Shame on this government.
Mike Seaman.
Thank you, Mr Chair. I think the previous member was following the philosophy that if you say it loud enough it must be true, Mr Chairman. But the reality is